Hello and welcome to the Fit Finder Sessions, the Advisors edition, with myself, Henry Elliston, Tim Webb, Tom Senegals,
Oh,
and in a one-off, this time only special, we've also brought along Bob the Buddha for some insightful words of philosophical wisdom. So today, quick chat over what's going on in the news of all things personal finance. We're going to talk a little bit about the Wirecard fiasco over in Germany, trade disputes. Tim's going to fill us in on, and I'll talk to you a little bit about some mortgage appraisals for first-time buyers. My daughter has just come in to hear about whether or not she's got any chance of buying a house anytime soon because she's had enough of living with me and wants to move out. But to start, Mr. Senegals, tell us what's been happening over in Germany.
There's a payment company called Wirecard. If you've been watching the financial news, you might have heard what's going on. And effectively, 1.9 billion that was supposedly on the balance sheet is no longer there. Effectively, EY have been auditing. I'm sure they won't say it's their fault, but they didn't check any bank statements for 3 years.
A lot of money to lose, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not exactly down the back of the sofa, although I think that was the explanation given of it's somewhere in the Philippines. Didn't materialise, and the company's rapidly disappeared because of it. And their chief executive, Marcus Braun, he's been I think he's been charged, but perhaps released on bail for various amounts of fraud. I think it just proves that this is exactly why we don't recommend selecting direct equities. Use a diversified portfolio. You don't want to be Wirecard up until that heavy funds like I think Jupiter European, or the chap who used to run Jupiter European. Those holdings have been significantly devalued. From a UK perspective, it shouldn't affect too many people, unless you had one of those curve cards where you could combine all your credit cards onto one single card. Wirecard used to provide some of the technology for that. These scandals are getting less over the years, but they still happen. I think everyone knows of a few: Enron, WorldCom, all of these companies that disappear over time. But hence why being diversified as possible is always best.
All right, sensible advice. For anyone wondering what that book was that was just being hung over my shoulder, that was The Dream Retirement by a certain Mr. Charlie Redding that I've got my daughter reading. So there we are. Tim, tell us about trade disputes.
All things trade wars, right? Well, whether or not it's a star headline or just sort of more sideways action, we'll yet to know. But what ground was made towards the beginning of the year and back into last year with the phase one being signed and dealt with appears to have been thrown out. I guess. I think
this is the American Chinese.
Yeah, US-China. It seems to be back on for heated discussions whether or not it's still going to happen and whether or not it's any constructive progress is going to be made. There's nothing too exciting to sort of polar opposite to what we already know. Although the former EU trade chief, Cecilia Malmström, for anyone who's familiar with her, so there's a worrying tendency now towards protectionism. I think. And just generally the level of trade in goods this year has been a record low. I think what they're expecting for next year, depending on these conversations how they go, or the expected rebound could be hindered as well. So it's an interesting one. Obviously because of COVID and obviously the massive slowdown in trade in general as a result of that. But I think I'm quoting an article here from Reuters where they're saying. What's gone on with COVID, etc., has highlighted how global chains, supply chains, etc. Excuse me, can leave people fairly stranded in terms of medical protection and PPE and food supplies and so on. So hence more the encouragement to rely on oneself or the country's self rather than others. So whether or not we'll see a more widespread reversal of the globalization that we all know is the case at the moment, and more towards protecting the domestic shores, etc. We'll see. But yeah, who knows? It might just be more sort of noise and white noise going on, because nothing too bold has actually happened. It's just more of a headline that it's coming back up in conversation. So that's something to keep an eye on.
It's been interesting, hasn't it, on that point, that when this all started, the one thing that we were all clamoring for was bog roll. But I believe I'm right in saying that we make most of our own toilet tissue. But then we had to go to the Turks to provide us with PPE for all our NHS staff. But it wasn't up to scratch.
No,
I think supply chains are either, there's a lot of talk about being on an Eastern supply chain or a Western supply chain, or China, US, however you want to describe it. But I think even if you can produce some of the things in-house, I know sort of PZ Cuisance to produce all the Carex hand soap and things like that, even though they're making it here in the UK, they can't get some of the goods in to then produce the various soap and bits and pieces. So I think there's going to be more countries trying to be sustainable and a bit more fragmented. But again, coming back to that diversification point, it's just making sure you've got companies that can weather storms and aren't stuck. You're not solely investing in the hospitality trade or airlines or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
absolutely.
You wouldn't have done too well out of your hospitality shares recently. Although it does make me wonder, what was it if you invested in an ice cream company and an umbrella company, you'll do well in any British summer? I wonder whether or not that would have worked this year, actually.
Yeah.
I was going to talk just briefly about what I've seen in the papers regarding mortgage approvals. So we've seen that high loan-to-value deals now being pulled from the market, which of course tends to affect first-time buyers more than anybody else. So, your 95% loan-to-value and 90% loan-to-value deals are not as prevalent as they once were. And really, I think this often happens, certainly in times of stress on the property market. And the reason it's happening is lenders are worried that they're going to lend money and the property market will crash or fall at any rate. And then they will be left with a whole load of borrowers on their books in negative equity. I suspect this sort of paradigm is set to remain for, and well, at least until the end of the year, at least until people are a little bit more aware and understand what is going to happen to the property market. And of course, actually, people start to go back. Well, as many people as possible have gone back to work. The furlough scheme's ended, and we know what sort of real unemployment figures we're looking at and how stressed people are going to be in paying their mortgages. And of course, actually, the real unemployment is likely to affect those first-time buyers more than it is probably the more mature homeowner, such as myself. And so it'll be really interesting to see that. And of course, you need that first-time buyer end of the market to be working, because of course it drives the rest of the market. So the rest of the people who want to buy and sell houses and move on through. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. But yeah, more bad news for the youngsters in the room, Tim. One day you'll be able to buy a house. But that's it from me. I don't know if you guys have got any comments on mortgages.
I think as much as that part of the market is harder, I think Dan, who does our mortgages in-house for us, for the three of us sat here, but also our clients, I think it's important to get good advice. And sometimes it's better to wait and save up a bit more deposit and get a better deal, rather than trying to find the more obscure lenders who are willing to maybe take on those loans at 90% loan. It doesn't take a lot to end up in negative equity, but if you you can hold out for a bit and maybe wait for a bargain, then it certainly helps. But getting some advice is, it's definitely worthwhile.
Absolutely. Wise words of wisdom, Tom. Well done. That's it from us today. I hope you've enjoyed these bon mots on personal finance. If you've got anything you'd like us to talk about, please do hit the comments button beneath the screen, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. All the best. Bye bye.